Hi, Black Cat recapped here. Today I am going to explain a drama movie named Society of the Snow. On October 13, 1972, a group of rugby players from Uruguay, known as the Old Christians Club, took a plane to go to Chile for a special match. Most of them had never left their country before, so this trip was very exciting for them. Some family members also came along to show their support. As the plane approached the Andes Mountains, which separate Chile and Argentina, it started shaking a couple of times. A passenger explained that warm winds from Argentina were colliding with the cold mountain air, creating a suction effect that caused some slight turbulence. However, the turbulence got worse, and suddenly the plane descended a few miles. The pilots tried to navigate through stormy winds, and everyone on board held tight as their belongings fell in the corridor. They briefly saw the sun, but the plane descended again and hit the mountain, breaking in half. One of the players was thrown away with the tail of the plane, while the front part kept going until it crashed into the snow. This caused seats to collide with each other, resulting in multiple people being killed in various gruesome ways. After the crash, the survivors tried to overcome the shock and leave their seats to help the passengers who were trapped. 2 medical students tried to help those with broken limbs stay calm. Some guys check on the pilot, but he dies after saying a few words, and the radio isn't working. As night falls, the temperature drops fast, so the survivors gather inside the plane, using bags to cover any holes. Many of them can't stop panicking or crying, so they do their best to comfort each other. By morning, they discover that a few more people have frozen to death. The storm has passed, and the sun is shining, but all they can see is snow and mountains for miles. The group decides they must start working together to survive. They remove seats and debris from the plane to make space for everyone to sleep at night. They move the injured survivors to a spot where they can get the most sunlight, prioritizing their care. Every useful object they find is stored in suitcases for protection, and all bags are carefully searched for food. The bodies are moved away from the plane and kept together nearby, covered in snow to prevent them from rotting, in the hope that they can take them with them when help arrives. By the end of the first day, they already have 11 dead people, plus the one guy who was blown away. Once they get organized, they have a little snack, being careful to save their food. Suddenly, they hear a plane flying nearby, so they yell and wave their arms, but the plane doesn't see them. On the second night, they sleep inside the plane, using clothes from bags as blankets and covering the holes with suitcases. On the third day, Nando finally wakes up. He's been unconscious since the crash, so they have to explain what happened. Although his body is in bad shape, he drags himself to be with his sister, who isn't doing well either. When Nando asks about their mom, they sadly tell him she died. Afterward, they use metal to melt snow for water. They make a big X on the ground with suitcases, hoping to be seen. When another plane flies by, they try to reflect the sun on mirrors and keep yelling for help. Someone notices the plane's wings moving, suggesting that they might have been seen. The next day, they hear the plane again, but it's far away, indicating that it's searching in a different area and didn't spot them. The group starts discussing how to survive and remembers there were batteries in the tail, so they decide to go out and find it. Using mirrors and leather from the seats, 4 survivors head up the mountain to locate the tail. After climbing a few miles, they realize the crash site can't be seen from a distance due to the snow, making the chances of a rescue almost zero. Seeing some snowfall, the 4 decide to return to the crash site. Days pass, and after a week, they run out of food. Nando suggests he'll eat bodies if necessary, sparking a debate over whether to take meat from the deceased passengers. Some survivors mention dark pea, others worry about legal consequences, but no agreement is reached. Growing desperate for food, they resort to eating anything they can find, like shoelaces and cigarettes. On the 8th day, Nando's sister passes away, and Coco writes a letter to his parents describing the tragedy. Several storms hit them in the following days, and they survive by hiding inside the plane. However, by day 21, half of the group becomes tired of the situation and gives permission for others to eat their bodies if they die. Afterward, they step outside, using a piece of glass to take meat from the bodies to feed themselves again. A few people, upon seeing this, change their minds and join the group outside to finally eat as well. Only 5 people remain who refuse to become cannibals. The next day, they establish a proper system to hide most of the bodies during this task, making it less disturbing for those who aren't participating. They also start leaving some meat pieces under the sun to warm them up. Later, they discover a new suitcase buried in the snow, containing a surprising radio. After building a makeshift antenna, they manage to turn it on, only to hear from the news that the government has decided to stop looking for them after 66 search missions. The entire group has a breakdown, losing all hope. Following this, 3 guys decide to go out and look for the plane's tail properly this time. The first thing they find is lots of debris and 5 bodies, including the guy that had been sucked out of the plane during the fall. They move as fast as they can, dealing with slipping down while climbing and freezing winds that make it hard to breathe. At night, they huddle together against the side of the mountain, attempting to sleep amidst a storm raging around them. They wake up, covered in snow but alive. However, one of them is blind, and the other 2 are very weak, so they slide down on a piece of debris to go back. After such a scary experience, the last guy agrees to eat meat and goes to sleep in tears. On day 17, the group has been dealing with a storm for 5 days. They stay inside the plane, trying to tell stories to keep the mood up. Suddenly, an avalanche comes down, burying the plane and filling it with snow. Desperately, they start digging in the snow to bring out all the passengers who got buried. After lots of work, effort, and screaming, they manage to get everyone out except for a woman who was so deep down that she died quickly. At that moment, they hear a strange noise and discover another avalanche coming, burying them again and killing a few more men, including the team captain. The survivors quickly make some holes to breathe, but as they wait, they can only pray while hearing the sounds of falling snow. Once they regain some energy, they move 8 bodies to a corner. On day 18, buried for 2 days, hunger becomes unbearable. They have no choice but to start getting meat, but this time it's much harder because they can't hide most of the bodies in snow to avoid seeing their faces. It means they know exactly who they are eating. This makes Numa so angry that he starts digging and breaking the windows, which ends up hurting his leg with the glass. However, this doesn't stop him, and he continues digging. On day 20, he finally opens a hole in the snow big enough for the remaining survivors to come out. After a moment to relax and appreciate the fact they're alive, the group starts digging out the plane. Numa discovers a cut on his foot, unnoticed due to the cold, but he ignores it and continues helping. Eventually, sunny days help them get the plane out, and they even consider sending a few men out on a search again, but they have no way to survive the freezing nights. They agree to wait a few more days since summer is around the corner. On day 34, the thaw finally begins. The 2 injured men from the beginning are very sick, and the med students know there isn't anything else they can do. In just a few hours, they find that Coco's lungs are filled with fluid, and no amount of CPR can help him breathe. He dies soon after. When they remove the body, they find his letter and keep it safe. On day 36, the weather gets better enough to go on a new search. Soon, Numa starts feeling dizzy and falls. When they check his foot, they find out his wound is infected. The group thinks they should take him back, but Numa says he's strong enough to return alone and asks them to keep going. When Numa gets back to the crash site, he passes out. A few hours later, he wakes up to find the other sick passenger hallucinating before dying. The next morning, the group starts removing the ice from the cockpit in case they may need it. Soon, the searchers return with big news: they've found the tail of the plane. By making a couple of short trips, they bring lots of clean coats, bottles of rum, cigarettes, and even chocolate. They also find the plane's batteries, so they try to connect them to the cockpit to make the radio work. After lots of work, they manage to get some static, but they don't get anyone to answer them. Numa's infection is getting worse and spreading to the rest of his body. Knowing he doesn't have much time left, Numa stops eating so the others can have more. They attempt to fix the radio again, but the wires cause a small short circuit, and they give up. In their anger, they write a message on the plane counting the survivors. During another trip to the tail, the group is surprised to find some waterproof fabric that was covering the pipes. The smaller radio is still working, and they hear on the news that even though 58 days have passed since the crash, the Air Force is planning to send another aircraft to search for them. Later, the group distracts themselves by making bird noises as they see them fly by, and they find a camera, which they use to take a bunch of pictures. That night, Numa gives them permission to eat his body, and in the morning, they find him dead. There's a note in his hands that says there's no greater love than to give one's life for friends. Inspired by these words, Roberto, Nando, and Tintin decide to go out again. They start climbing west with the goal of crossing the mountain to reach Chile. The weather gets really windy at night, so they dig a hole in the snow and huddle inside the sleeping bag, which allows them to survive until morning. When they finally reach the top of a tall mountain, they're devastated to find out there's still a long way to go. They briefly think about giving up because they don't have enough food for the journey. Tintin volunteers to go back, so there will be enough food for only Roberto and Nando. The trip is very long and hard, but after a lot of walking, the duo finally comes down to a valley where the ground is more rocky than snowy. When Nando's shoe breaks, Roberto ties some fabric around it, and they keep going. All this effort pays off because they eventually find a river with fresh water and even a little lizard. At that moment, they look up and, to their shock, find a man on a horse staring at them. He's on the other side of the river, and the noise of the water doesn't let him hear them correctly. He throws some paper and a pencil at them. The duo explains who they are, and the man takes the paper back to make some calls. Soon, the message reaches the Air Rescue Service, and a new mission is planned. The man comes back for Roberto and Nando and takes them to his cabin, where they can finally eat proper food. In just a few hours, the area is surrounded by reporters who don't hesitate to ask awkward questions. When the news reaches the crash site, the group is excited to hear that rescue is coming soon. They start cleaning up to look as nice as possible and gather their things in bags, including pieces of the plane as a keepsake. On day 71, the group is finally rescued, and they cry with joy when they see the helicopters. Someone records the whole rescue, noting that the group insists on bringing their bags even if there's no room for them. In total, 16 people have survived. Once they reach the city, their families are already there waiting to welcome them back. Then, they're taken to the hospital, where a large crowd is waiting to call them heroes. The doctors keep the reporters out and run thorough tests to check on their health. Since they can barely move, they help each other take a shower, and then their families take care of their grooming. Each survivor is given their own bed, but that night they're still dealing with the aftershock, so they huddle up to sleep as a group.